With The Legend of Swirls, Twilight Swirls being Wind Waker 2, lots of things start to make more sense when we start talking about the game. The Forest Temple in Twilight Princess is located within the carcass of a large dead tree, situated in an area called the Faron Woods. As Nintendo loves to reuse locations for their games, the naming of certain locations makes it a lot more confusing for newer players. Back when I played Twilight Princess for the first time, I had never heard of Faron Woods before, as I grew up with the Lost Woods from Ocarina of Time and other games. This name was reused years later in Skyward Sword, as the Faron Woods existed in that game too. Now, what always made me scratch my head was the Forest Temple in Twilight Princess, because it was an incredible mysterious place, so it is only natural for me to start asking questions about it. The environment of the temple is obviously all plant-based, and symbols are all scattered everywhere. Some are swirls, with the Kokiri symbol written on all the doors. Wait, Kokiri symbols? But this place isn't in the Kokiri forest, but in the Faron Woods. So why are these symbols found here? A lot has happened between these 100 years that changed the forest so much that it is barely recognizable from Ocarina of Time. Long ago, the Kokiri used to live in this part of the forest, and they lived together with a spirit deity called the Deku Tree. The Deku Tree used to watch over the forest and live together with the nature spirits of fairies and Kokiri alike. The Kokiri weren't like all the other races, as they looked like playful children, as they didn't become older by the power of the great Deku Tree. The Hylians looked at them like innocent kids, and left them alone to live side by side. But in Ocarina of Time, something happened to the great Deku Tree. The tree was cursed by the evil of Ganondorf, and a being lived inside the tree, a parasitic creature called Queen Gohma, feeding off the life force of the tree, and because of this, the tree was slowly dying. The life force created more Gohma offspring, and at the time, young Link, the hero of time, had to defeat this parasite to overcome the curse. Unfortunately, by the time Link was able to lift the curse, the tree had no more energy left to live and died. Because of the deity of the forest dying, the Kokiri weren't protected anymore by its power. There's a myth spreading around that once a Kokiri leaves the forest, the Kokiri will eventually die. But this myth was not true. In the end credits of Ocarina of Time, we can clearly see that the Kokiri are able to survive beyond the forest. But I believe this happened after Deku Tree passed away. When we travel through time as adult Link and beat the Forest Temple, a young Deku Sprout emerges right next to the once old Deku Tree. With this creepy smile on his face, he starts explaining the story of how Link was not a child of the forest, but that he was in fact a Hylian. His mother dropped him off into the forest as she was heavily injured by fleeing the war, and died not long after it. She hoped that someone wanted to protect him, with the Deku Tree knowing that this child had a great destiny in front of him, and decided to take him into the village. But the Deku Sprout, the one telling the story, did not appear in the child timeline, because adult Link was never able to beat the Forest Temple in Ocarina of Time and lift the curse that was once placed upon the forest. Instead, after Zelda sent adult Link back into his original timeline, young Link went straight to Princess Zelda, telling her about the intentions of Ganondorf and what he was up to. After this, Link eventually went away in search of Navi in the Lost Woods. As there is no Deku Sprout ready to grow, even though a lot of people believe that the sprout somehow grew anyway, but I don't, and no great Deku Tree to protect the forest, that the Kokiri had to find some other way to continue living. Time passed on. The Interloper War was now corrupting and slowly destroying Hyrule. The war, taking its heavy toll, slowly became too much for the people to handle. The goddesses had to intervene with the darkness, but while this was happening, their leader, Ganondorf, was trapped by the royal family of Hyrule within the prison of the Arbiter Grounds. The golden spirits of the four races, Faron, Ordona, Eldin, and Lanayru, were the ones that were summoned by the goddesses to stop the dark invasion. Faron was the spiritual embodiment of the Kokiri, as he has the shape of a monkey and has the Kokiri symbol on his arm. I don't think anyone ever noticed that, have they? Anyway, as time went on, and darkness was stopped by the light spirits, Faron eventually lived inside the forest, and because of this, the Kokiri forest was now named Faron Woods, after the light spirit that saved Hyrule from destruction in some form of honoration. The Kokiri, living in that region, now had another spiritual leader to look upon, and took the forms of monkeys in order to worship Faron, but it didn't stop there. Throughout the Forest Temple, we can find all kinds of equipment and tools to honor Faron and the gods, which are totems, torches, altars, and so on. But they didn't only worship Faron, but also a fairy. This fairy was once the Fairy of Wind, and she was the first to be worshipped before the war started. This is why the Forest Temple was designed in such a way, with having Wind Waker 2 in mind, having all sorts of wind mechanics. Only monkeys are able to cross the Forest Temple without the help of tools that Link, the hero of Twilight, will acquire through this temple. As the Kokiri went on in the form of monkeys, as the Light Protector had the form of one, with the biggest monkey as the leader being Ook, they lived separately from the Hylians, in their own little bubble. But then, years passed. Nature grew and grew more separate from civilization, and a dark new threat was arising from the depths of her secret and dark Twilight realm. A dark creature called Zant. His dark plans distorted Hyrule slowly in all sorts of ways, locking away all the light spirits that once protected the lands. This caused Faron Woods to slowly evolve into a messy and poisonous filth, created by a parasitic plant that was grown inside the home of the Kokiri, the Forest Temple. The name of this biological plant was Diababa, which has the words of diabolical and Dekubaba, with Dekubabas being the famous plants within the Legend of Zelda series. In the boss rune of the Diababa, we can clearly see the purple fluid that comes from the plant, which is the indication that this boss is the cause of all the harm in Faron Woods. And to me, because I believe this, that this was once the spring where the Wind Fairy used to reside in. The parasites of the plant began to mind control the monkey population, with the leader of the monkeys, Ook, being the one that was mind controlled to keep outsiders out of the temple. When Link finds Ook, they started the fight, and when Link beats Ook, the parasite that was mind controlling him dies, allowing Ook to return to normal, leaving the boomerang on the ground for Link to take it. Here, the boomerang starts talking and telling Link that he receives her blessing for saving her and is now allowed to use her weapon. This is what fairies do in The Legend of Zelda after all, giving people powers. As Link approaches the toxic plant, saving all the imprisoned monkeys inside the temple, he comes across the evil Veggie, and while fights goes on, Ook, the leader of the monkeys that simply took off after his defeat, tries to help Link by holding down bombs within his feet, with Link having to throw the boomerang against it in order to hit the head of Diababa, and when he does, Diababa dies. And here we get the first part of the fused shadow, a dark piece of equipment that was used by the interlopers. By defeating Diababa, the water becomes clean again, but it doesn't change anything as the damage was already been done. As the monkeys eventually thank Link for helping them, their evolution can continue on, and by doing so, they slowly over the course of thousands of years became the Koroks, a transformation that will always happen in any timeline, no matter what happens, as that is clearly seen in the other timeline. However, that part is for another video. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video.